Welcome to another OU Insider Under the Visor Sooners podcast. My name is Brandon Drumm. I'm here with Parker Thune. And wow. First and foremost, we want to thank all the Oklahoma Sooners fans out there for, look, I know OU had a big July, but OU Insider had a massive July with 11 plus million page views and nearly, if not over 500 new signups for the month. And we cannot thank you guys enough. We were so very blessed to be able to do that for you guys. I'll do these podcasts, do the YouTube lives, bring news and notes for you guys every day. It is so awesome. Just thank you guys so very much for that. But the Sooners, my goodness. Party in the Palace, Derrick LeBlanc. There is some things happening in Norman, and the season is about to start here very soon. So you guys better be on OU Insider, and you better listen to this whole podcast because we have a lot going for you guys today. We're going to talk about a ton of things. Big July. We're going to talk about that, the recruiting. We're going to talk about Derrick LeBlanc and his commitment. I was down there for that. It was a really cool deal. Party in the Palace, all the big visitors that were there. There was also a big visit weekend or big visit day for the 24s and 25s when they had the underclassmen day on the Wednesday. It was a camp / little get together type deal that was huge and everybody loved it. We're going to talk about August fall camp, some recruiting that's going to be happening in August as well, because it doesn't stop, folks. It doesn't stop. And then obviously we're going to talk about our expectations for the season as we break down some things. So this is a huge podcast for you guys, and we're glad to have you guys here. Parker, how are you doing, man?
Well, Brandon, it is a fantastic time to be an Oklahoma Sooners fan. It's an even better time to be an OU Insider VIP. Again, want to echo it. Thanks to all of you that have just jumped on board in the month of July, because, traditionally July has been one of those slower months on the calendar, at least when you're in this business, in the field of sports journalism, and especially doing what we do. There are ebbs and flows to every season, right? And historically speaking, July's been one of the slower months for OU Insider in terms of page views, in terms of new subscribers. Brent Venables is blowing benchmarks out of the water as head coach at the University of Oklahoma when it comes to recruiting, and we are blowing benchmarks out of the water at OU Insider in the month of July. So huge shout out to all of you that have just joined the army at OUinsider.com. But yeah, Brandon, you said it. It has been quite the month, and as we sit here, there's about an hour and a half left in it. So we sit here on a Sunday night recording this podcast. The month of July will be remembered. This particular July 2022, will be remembered as a pivotal month and one of the greatest months in recent memory when you're talking specifically about recruiting for the Oklahoma Sooners. I mean, what didn't happen this month? That's essentially where we're at. Have you seen you've seen the movie The Princess Bride, right, Brandon?
Absolutely.
Oh, yeah. Brent Venables is just walking around in his Holocaust cloak with fire everywhere. That's what it seems like at this point. Miguel Chavis is right there with him because that man can do no wrong.
My name is something Montoya. I can't remember how it goes, but yeah, that was a great movie, man. When they're doing the duel, what do they say?
When they're doing the duel? Oh,
yeah,
you think when he's like, my name is Inigo Montoya. You killed my father. Montoya.
You killed my
Prepare to die.
Prepare to die. Yeah, yes. Yes, that's a fantastic movie, man. Anytime you have Andre the Giant in there, I mean, it's so cheesy, but it's so good. So good. There's a lot of movies like that from the 80s. Did you ever watch Willow?
I don't think so.
Oh gosh, man, that movie. Yeah, that's before your time. I remember Willow and Benji. There's a movie about
Benji. I've seen that one. Yep.
I love those when I was a kid. Anyways, we digress. We apologize. Those are anytime you bring up those type of movies, I start going flashbacks. Yeah, man, what a great July for the Sooners. I think we got to start with the Derrick LeBlanc commitment. Obviously, we can get into talking more about the July. We'll recap that here in just a second. But man, I'm telling you, like when I went down there, I know you guys were like, "Oh, well, you were acting like Florida this, Florida." Like, well, we knew he was going to Oklahoma. Like we knew that months ago, and we did our due diligence sitting on it because we told Ricardo and Derrick we would not do anything with it, and we're gonna keep our word with that type of stuff. So we did so, and yeah, when I went down there, Cedric Baxter Jr. was there, which was pretty cool, supporting his buddy. And the funny thing is Derrick's standing next to me. It was after John Walker announced, and he announced, and we were waiting on the Florida DB,
Jakeem Jackson.
Jakeem Jackson. Yeah, so we were waiting on him to commit, and Cedric walked by, and Derrick goes, "I'm gonna be tackling you, fool, here for the next few years." And they just kind of were joking with each other because, he likes Texas A&M, a lot of SEC schools, and obviously with Oklahoma being in the SEC, he has a chance to play against him no matter where Cedric Baxter ends up. So it was just kind of funny to see that back and forth. I know Texas feels pretty good, and if that's really the case, and Cedric Baxter Jr. ends up at Texas, that would be a big get for them, obviously being one of the top running backs in the country. But on top of that, two really good friends going up against each other, rivals. And he also talked about Peyton Kirkland, and how they're going to be going one-on-one against each other quite a bit because of obviously the fact he's going to Texas. So, I mean, look, when I went down there, I was talking to them, and then he called out David Hicks. And obviously we're going to talk about David Hicks later on in this podcast.
You don't say.
Yeah. We were in a group scrum after he announced. He said, "Does anybody have any questions for me?" After he announced earlier, why Oklahoma, blah, 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 blah. And then I said, "So have you been recruiting anybody behind the scenes quietly?" And he's like, "Nah, not really yet," which I know that's not really the case. And he has a little bit because I've talked to people. And when he was at Oklahoma, he was really trying to get some guys to join them. And he's been in the group chats and all that type of stuff. So, I don't blame Derrick for not wanting to put all that stuff out there because it's a weird look when you just commit and you've been recruiting for somebody else behind the scenes quietly for a while. But which, at the end of the day, Derrick is going to be a great player and he's going to be a great recruiter for OU, especially in Florida, because he's very respected down there. But I asked the question. I said, "Okay, well, if you haven't, who do you want? If you haven't been recruiting, who do you want to recruit, or who are you going to go after first?" And he said David Hicks, and then kind of talked a little bit. So when we get into the one-on-one interview, it's about an hour or so later. I let everybody go before me and just kind of stood there and left him alone after a little bit because I wanted him to enjoy the process, enjoy the time he was there with his friends and family. And then finally, before I left, I said, "Hey, can I get the interview before I leave?" He said, "Yeah, let's do this right over here." So we walked over there, started talking. In the middle of the interview, I said, "You brought up David Hicks and said you wanted to recruit him." And then he goes in like this long talk about, "Dude, David," he said, "Are you going to post this?" I said, "Yeah." And he goes, David Hicks, you're coming to Oklahoma. Don't make me go capture you, man. Don't make me go kidnap you." All that type of stuff. Like he's really pushing that hard. And they're really good friends actually behind the scenes. So that's something that could work in Oklahoma's favor. And the fact that Derrick has a really good personality on him, he's going to sway some kids to join him in Norman. And that's something to watch moving forward. But we'll get into the David Hicks thing a little later. But getting Derrick LeBlanc, a player like him, very twitchy, very long, great frame, going to weigh about 280, 290 while he's in college. He's about 250 right now, 245, 260-ish range right now. He's got a good frame on him. He's very twitchy, very athletic. hard worker. That's something everybody, when I talked to everybody down there, they just talked about his hard work over and over and over. And, you have to like kids like that. I mean, and he's got very good personality, very charismatic. So he's got that leader quality in him too. And something I thought was interesting, when one of the D-line coaches for Osceola was leaving, he walked over to talk to me and Ricardo, and we were standing there, and I said, he goes, man, it's going to be tough to see those guys go. And he pointed to John Walker, who's going to UCF, one of the top D linemen in the country, and Derrick. And I said, man, they're really good players. And he turned to me and he goes, nah, they're great players and they're even better people. And he goes, that's what I'm going to miss the most. And I think that's something you see with a lot of guys that Brent Venables recruits, is he just gets guys that are going to fit the culture, that are going to be great players, going to fit the culture, and have excellent personalities.
And that's something we've talked about so much with this class, Brandon, is not just the type of players that OU's recruiting, but the type of people who fit the culture. And obviously you've had a whole lot more interpersonal interaction with Derrick Leblanc and the Leblanc family than I have. So you are very much the authority on that. I was on a podcast. Gosh, I can't remember which one. I've been on so many this past week because everybody's buzzing. But I was on a podcast earlier in the week, and I told the story of when I interviewed Derrick LeBlanc when he was a freshman, and he's on the phone with me answering my questions while he's ordering at Chipotle. One of the funniest things that's ever happened to me in my years of covering recruiting. That's probably the first thing that will always jump to mind for me when you bring up the name Derrick LeBlanc. But now, when you look across the board at Oklahoma's group of commits, which now numbers 18, could be 19 by the time this podcast drops, depending on when it goes public in relation to the announcement of Colton Vossick's commitment, which is heavily trending in Oklahoma's direction right now. Yeah. So you look at this class, and it's all high character dudes, and it's rare, right? It's rare that you end up with a class this good without a bunch of guys that are a whole bunch of personalities, in essence. Generally, you talk about, you've watched How I Met Your Mother, right, Brandon?
Every episode was probably one of my top 2 or 3 favorite sitcoms of all time. Yes.
Okay, good. We can stay friends then.
Yeah.
You have Barney Stinson's crazy hot scale, right? Well, there's something similar when you're talking about recruits, right? Like, the more talented they are, yes, exactly. The ones you find that are on especially when you're talking about the elite guys across the world of recruiting, the ones you find that are on the right side of what is it called? What is the diagonal called?
The access line?
I know there's.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I thought there was a technical term. I thought Barney had some name for it.
It's the keep going.
No, I can't remember which girl it's named after. I remember the Mendoza line, but that's not it.
Yeah, the Mendoza line. It's the Mendoza line.
It's not the Mendoza line. The Mendoza line is a horizontal line. Regardless, semantics. The point is, when you're talking about elite football players, generally with the real elite ones, you tend to get a whole lot of personalities mixed in. There is something of a crazy hot scale with elite football players across the country year in and year out. So when you find the guys that are on the right end of the line, as it were, between crazy and hot, or the axis of crazy and hot, those are the guys that you want to make a strong push to lock down. And it certainly appears as though Brent Venables and his staff have been able to identify the guys that fit that description and go and recruit them ardently. And they have, and they've been very successful along the way. You look at Oklahoma's group of commits right now, as things stand, Derrick LeBlanc is number 101 in the 24/7 sports composite. So assuming he gains one spot between now and the end of the cycle, we're gonna say the Sooners have 5 top 100 players in the nation as of right now.
It is the Mendoza line, because the lady, sorry to interrupt real quick, but the lady, her name was Vicky Mendoza, and he draws a diagonal line by Barney after the girl he dated who jumped back and forth across the line.
That's right. She
from
jumped
shaving
back
her
and forth.
head to losing 10 pounds to stabbing Barney with a fork to finally getting a boob job.
Okay, so it was the Mendoza line. There you go. I was wrong.
And blah blah was all the blah blah that Ted was dating was the if I remember the episode correctly.
That is the episode.
And she had like the handbags, right? The handbags. She was like a yes. Okay. All right. Sorry, folks. I'm sorry to interrupt. I just got totally lost in my mind on the. Sorry.
Oh, but that's fun though. Assuming Derrick LeBlanc picks up one spot, you are looking at a class right now for Oklahoma that includes 5 top 100 players in the 24/7 sports composite. That's only the second time that's happened over the last, I think I went back 13, 14, maybe even 15 years.
Okay.
When I was researching
that again.
The other day.
There's only that's OU's only had it twice where they've had 5 top 100 players composite.
At least over the past 12 years. I know for a fact I went back at least 12 years. So since 2010, only once have the Sooners had 5 of the top 100 players in the 24/7 sports composite. That year was 2018.
That's wild.
Yes. And so the Sooners have already hit that number. If you add
2019, they didn't do it.
No, 2019 they didn't. They
had 3 5-stars too.
They did. And those were their only 3 players in the top 100. Was Jaden Hazelwood, Spencer Rattler, and Theo Weiss, excuse me. So yes, this class is already in elite territory when you compare it to Oklahoma's recruiting classes in years past. Now, you think about what they could add down the stretch. If they get Jacoby Johnson, if they get Makari Vickers, if they get Tassili Akana, if they get DJ Hicks, if they end up with Malachi Coleman, like you can start to see just how big that number could get. And one way or another, it's going to blow the previous number out of the water. So Oklahoma's already in position to sign a more top-heavy class or a more talent-dense class when you're specifically talking about the top 100 players in the nation than they have ever signed in the modern recruiting era.
That's insane. And, you're looking at, like you said, like Tassili Akana potentially. And here's the crazy part. And I was talking to somebody today about, there was a source and I was talking to them about just how many 5-stars Oklahoma could end up in this class. And the potential's there because when you look at what Oklahoma has already, because you and I both expect after Jackson Arnold plays his senior year, he's going to move up in the top 10. Like it's going to happen because of the level of competition he has to play against, how good his team is, and how good he is as a player and what he's proven. He carries them again to the state finals again. How could they not put him in the top 10? Like it's very reminiscent to Clemson, the guy from Westlake last year that Clemson got, the quarterback.
Cade Klubnik.
Cade Klubnik. Yep, Cade Klubnik. And the meteoric rise he took is very reminiscent to what Jackson Arnold did, through his junior and senior years. So I find that almost inevitable at this point, in my opinion, with Jackson. And then when Rivals fixes their deal with PJ Adebawore in the next rankings, he's going to jump up from like 55 to probably 32, 33 maybe.
He
right
could be
there
in 5-star territory. Yeah.
He could be in 5-star territory, legitimately could be in 5-star territory at that point. So there you go. So there's 2. If Oklahoma can somehow add David Hicks, there's 3. Okay, there's 3 5-stars there. And now you're looking at Caden Green has a chance to continue to move up into that 5-star range. He keeps jumping and jumping and jumping. And with a good senior year, that's very possible. Petaway has a good chance being 44 overall in the composite rankings. He has a chance to do it. So there could be 4 or 5 guys, maybe even more than that, when this thing's all said and done, that Oklahoma has in 5-star range. That is national title competing class. And the transfers haven't even happened. And this is what I was told. I talked to somebody the other day. I said, so what happens? Do y'all think you're going to get 24, 25, 26? And the source goes, and this source, I promise you would know the numbers, goes, I would be shocked if OU didn't get 26 at least, maybe 27, 28. When
at this point, if you're,
because they want to sign more high school kids than transfers. That's just how Venables wants to build it.
Yeah, well, I mean, if you read between the lines with everything that went down behind the scenes this past weekend with the visits, right, you already get the sense Oklahoma is going to be pretty close to that 26 number by September. And so they're not going to have a whole lot of work to do over the course of the fall and winter. And here's the thing. Let me throw one other name at you when you're talking about potential 5 stars. I love Caden Green. Love him to death. Been tied with him and his family for a long time. They're probably watching / listening to this. I don't think Caden Green is going to climb to 5-star territory just because with offensive linemen, there's generally not that type of upward mobility that late in the process. So I do think he's going to, at the very least, cement his status as a top 75 player in the nation. He could get into the top 50. I think being in 5-star territory is going to be a tall task for an offensive lineman with where he sits this late. Jaquays Petaway, I just wonder what's left for him to do that he hasn't already done as somebody that's been playing varsity ball at a very high level as a freshman. So I think he stays on the very, very high end of 4-star territory, but I struggle to believe he gains that 5th star as well. I'd love to be wrong on that one. There is one guy that Oklahoma is still in the mix for that I do think could ultimately pick up a 5th star as well. No, not Cecilia Kana. It's Malachi Coleman, because you look at what he has done on the football field over the course of the last 2 years on varsity, or rather what he hasn't done, quite frankly. He only caught, I think, 18, 19 passes last year, if I'm not mistaken. Mm-hmm. So when you're talking about tape, Malachi Coleman doesn't have a lot of it. The tape he has is good. It's really good, but he doesn't have a whole lot of it right now. The ranking that he has attained already is largely based on the measurables. It's based on the combination of size and speed, which is elite. I've said it before. I'll say it again. He's a poor man's Nicholas Harbor at this point. And if you're being called a poor man's Nicholas Harbor, heck, you're a rich man's just about anybody else, because Nicholas Harbor is maybe the freakiest athlete in this entire class. But with Malachi Coleman, the measurables are there. The athletic traits are there. If this fall he puts up elite tape for the entirety of the season, there is a very good chance he could make that kind of a jump. He's kind of like PJ Adebawore in that sense. And PJ Adebawore had an outstanding junior year, 17.5 sacks. But the reason that he started to see his stock soar when it comes to recruiting rankings is because of the physical traits. It's the speed, it's the bendability, it's the 7'1" wingspan. Right? Malachi Coleman has a lot of athletic traits that are comparable to PJ Adebawore. And so if he blows up this fall in terms of what he's able to do on the gridiron, that's a guy that could make a late push for a 5th star. Now, whether he ends up in an Oklahoma uniform is another conversation entirely, but that's one of the very, very few targets left on the offensive board for Oklahoma, but one that I do think has the opportunity to continue moving up the rankings in a big way.
So I'm trying to wrap my head around the Malachi Coleman thing, just because I don't know as much about him as you do, number one, but and I'm trying to think, like, I think Akana could, just because he went from Hawaii to Utah. And I think, playing in Hawaii puts you at a disadvantage anyways. It's really hard to get out there to see somebody. So the fact that he bumped himself into the top 100, like 65, 66, wherever he's at.
69 right now.
69. There you go. He oh man, we're immature. So that tells me that there's movement for him,
Well, and if you
because of
look
what
at
he's already done.
you look at his ranking according to our team of experts at 24/7 Sports, they have him as the number 34 player in the country. That's borderline 5-star territory right there.
Yep. You can have, and this is something I want to explain to everybody. So 5-star, everybody always asks us, so we'll explain this real quick. 5-star for 247 is we look at talent, we look at potential mostly. And do we project these guys as future first round picks? So that's why you see 32 first 5 stars. And sometimes, just like you would in a deep NFL draft, you'll have guys that are probably first round talents that roll over into the second round. Sometimes you can have up to 35, 44 5 stars. It all depends on how deep this class is and how much, composite wise, if they can make it work, numbers wise. So that's how you look at it. I think the most I've seen is like 35, 36 5 stars before, but I mean, 40 out of, almost 1 million kids in every class. That's not, I don't think, outlandish to think there could be 45. Because if you're going to name an All-American team, there's 22. If you're going to name the second team, you got 44. So I think most people would consider first and second team All-Americans 5 stars in the college ranks. So why not number it like that? So I think that people just as an example, that's how that stuff works for us. We base it on, are they going to be first, second round picks, third round picks, fourth round picks, projection wise, and you rank accordingly. So that's how that goes. Another thing that's been going on outside of the big July, and again, we're going to talk about that in a second, is the recruitment of Peyton Bowen, the 4-star safety out of Denton Guyer. And I know we've got to touch on that because everybody wants to talk about this recruitment. It's wild. He was in Norman this past weekend. He did have a good time. Now, having a good time is all relative and it's subjective at the same time. And it's opinionated. Like, did he? And that, yeah, Peyton's not going to talk to anybody. That's just fact. He's not going to talk to anybody, at least on the record right now. That's just how he is. And the other reason is because he's under a lot of stress because he's been committed to Notre Dame for 6 months and visited Oklahoma 7-8 times in between that. So there is some questions to be had and made, and I think here in the next 10 days we might have this thing over with, if I was to guess, because his timeline that he wants is to have it done before the season starts and or fall practice gets really, really rocking and rolling, because he wants to focus on his senior season and be done with it. So with Oklahoma and A&M both pushing, he visited both this past weekend. He spent more time in Norman than he did College Station, but that's neither here nor there. He's been to OU more than A&M as well by quite a bit, actually. But his brother's going to play into this recruitment. Eli is getting recruited very hard by OU. He's getting recruited by Notre Dame. Texas A&M hasn't offered. I don't know if that's going to sway it completely, but I think that works in Oklahoma's favor. Then you add the fact that Ryan Yates, his safety, his DB teammate, is also really liking Oklahoma right now, regardless of his LSU commitment or not. I expect him to take an official in September at some point. And if that does take place, he gets his mom and dad back up there. I could see a flip happening. Like, I am not shy about that I think a flip could be happening. You add Jackson Arnold into the situation, and you have 4 guys from the Guyer area that are all very close friends. And, Oklahoma could go 4 for 4 there. And also, I want to make another note that the head coach at Denton Guyer is very, very good friends with Jeff Lebby. So they coached together at Baylor, roommates, all that type of stuff. So very good friends. And so there's a lot going in Oklahoma's favor. Coach Brandon Hall is leading the charge. Coach Valai is kind of his backup with Peyton Bowen and Ryan Yates. So there's a lot that could happen here over the next 2 months in this situation. When you add Yates to this whole deal, but regarding Bowen, I think we're going to know whether he's going to stick with Notre Dame or flip to A&M or Oklahoma. I think with relative in the next 10, 14 days, and maybe even within the next week potentially. So we'll see how all that plays out. I don't want to say one way or the other how I feel because I don't know how I feel. Honestly, I feel like I'm Peyton Bowen right now just because I'm on the fence on this. Now, my gut tells me Oklahoma is going to end up winning this battle just from things people I've talked to over the last 24 hours. But to discount Notre Dame or Texas A&M in this would be presumptuous, would be foolish, because there's a scenario where some people around him may not want him at Oklahoma, or may not feel it's that's a wrong word to say, may not feel as comfortable with Oklahoma as they do maybe Notre Dame or A&M. And even if Peyton does like OU more, the compromise could be A&M in this, so there's a lot to juggle here right now in that recruitment.
Yeah, certainly. And I think, look, if you mentioned it right there, Brandon, the compromise might be A&M. And I think if you're reading the tea leaves here, it becomes pretty apparent that Notre Dame is probably the least likely destination of the three, just given the way that this has all gone down. And it's been a process, man. It feels like we've been almost not necessarily stuck in a holding pattern because things have been happening. Visits have continued to occur. Conversations are being had, right? So it's not just like we're waiting in deathly silence for something to drop, but it seems like we're having a lot of the same conversations that we were having 3-4 months ago regarding Peyton Bowen. Obviously, A&M is something of a new wrinkle. And I do think it's significant, as you mentioned, that they haven't offered the younger brother, Eli, yet. OU has a lot working in their favor between Arnold and Yates and the offer to Eli. And so when you're looking at it from I would say purely from an outsider's perspective, and you are strictly trying to read the tea leaves, you'd say, okay, Oklahoma probably has the best chance here. But it does beg the question, doesn't it? If it was going to be Oklahoma, why hasn't it happened yet with how many visits he's taken there over the last several months? So, again, I think we're at the point, Brandon, where everybody is just ready for a resolution one way or another, regardless of what camp you're in, Notre Dame, A&M, Oklahoma. This is a situation that has been a very hot button topic in recruiting circles for a long, long, long time, dating back to March, maybe even February, honestly, when the buzz first started to get around about Oklahoma all of a sudden being a major player once again for Peyton Bowen. So this has probably been the most talked about recruitment overall of the 2023 cycle. If you're a Sooner fan and you've been on OU Insider VIP, it's on probably either that or Cole Adams, but we've been clear of the Cole Adams recruitment for about 6 weeks now. And here we are still trying to figure out where Peyton Bowen's ultimate destination is. So one way or another, I think what you can't really argue in all of this is that the Sooner staff has plenty of plans in place, regardless of whether Peyton Bowen ends up in an OU uniform or not. And when you look at how good that they have been at fortifying their recruiting board and creating contingency plans for their contingency plans and knowing right when to insert themselves or reinsert themselves into a particular recruitment in order to bring a guy home to Norman, Oklahoma. There's a lot of trust that has to be had in this Oklahoma staff, the way that they're conducting business right now. So if Peyton Bowen is a Sooner, fine and well. If he's not, odds are the Sooners have a guy or two that they're going to snag at that position that will be capable of being high-level players at the University of Oklahoma down the line.
Yeah, look, and some of those names that you want to throw out there, or I can throw out there, is somebody I've known for a little bit, is Jeremiah Anglin. I got to meet him at the combine, the national combine in San Antonio when he won the defensive MVP. I was actually the first person to really point him out to everybody because he ran 240s, and I was watching, so smooth and everything he did. Then he did some other drills, and I was like, I walked over Andrew Ivins after I talked to England, and I said, have you seen this kid? Andrew writes it down, starts watching him. He goes and has like 5 picks in the one-on-ones, and there were some 4-star, high 4-star, 3-star quarterbacks out there that are going to some big name P5 programs that he was jumping routes on, and some big time wide receivers too. And so he ended up winning the MVP, and at that point, his recruitment just exploded. And, he did really well at the Under Armour camp in Miami when I was out there to watch him too. Florida, he's supposed to announce at some point this week as well. I expect Oklahoma to, at the very least, do like a virtual visit with him because he's never been to OU, but he's been talking to Oklahoma quite a bit. Coach Brandon Hall has been on him really hard. And if things go awry with Bowen and Yates, I wouldn't be shocked to see Anglin and or Conrad Hussey, 4-star Penn State commit out of St. Thomas Aquinas in Fort Lauderdale, the same place as, Jayden Davis, Nick Benito, Joe Castiglione. They all, like, there's a mural of Joe Castiglione and all that in the locker room. It's pretty cool. So yeah, there's some names out there that Oklahoma can go after if they miss on those two. But people also need to understand, like, a lot of these other positions, and I'm not discounting what Oklahoma, all the other coaches have done at all, but what Brandon Hall's done to put Oklahoma in the position to even potentially flip Bowen and Yates is remarkable. He came in with 2 hands side behind back. Plus, he got McCarty right off the bat. He got the very first commit of the class, and McCarty could end up being the best safety out of them all. That's where things stand. And he's got 2 hands behind his back, and he's just swinging away, going to get some of these top guys, and could potentially flip from 2 of the top P5 programs in the country. So, I expect Coach Hall to end up with some really good classes in the near future because of that, because he's not going to have to worry about that 24 and 25. He's just going to be able to go out and just get them and not have to flip somebody. So this is, a part of the deal when you get a new staff. You've got to do some extra work. There's always that one position that is kind of a struggle because maybe just how everything lined up, everybody's committed, and that just happened to be how the safety, outside of a few of the targets that Coach Hall has offered, they've all been committed one way or the other, and he's just working his way in there. So I don't want Oklahoma fans to get too discouraged on it. I know it's frustrating because safety position is a position of need for Oklahoma. Outside of Key Lawrence, Robert Spears-Jennings, Billy Bowman, Justin Harrington, Broyles, and Jayden Davis and Morrison, there's not a lot of room to grow, or a lot of guys that some people feel very comfortable with, in Jordan Mukes, in that safety / nickel room. So when you got 3 spots and there's like 7-8 guys, to go between those 3 spots, that's not very deep. So you kind of need to get some more guys on campus to add to that and help out those positions. And that's something Oklahoma's trying to do right now. And I forgot Jaden Rowe. Whoa. That guy's going to be a dude, by the way. I can't wait to drop some team notes that I got later on OU Insider, by the way. I got some nasty team notes coming this week. Anyways,
Never
yeah,
ends.
that's kind of the wrap of the safety position and the recruitment there. The big July, man. We talked about it last podcast. Got to talk about it this podcast as well because it's July 31st, I believe, and
For about another 45 minutes, yeah.
yeah, and man, dadgum, it's amazing what Oklahoma did. August is going to kick off pretty hard too if things work out in Oklahoma's favor by 3 p.m. tomorrow. We'll see. And we're talking about the Colton Vasek announcement. I like Oklahoma where Oklahoma stands there, but
Yeah, which by the way, if that happens and that goes Oklahoma's way, I said it on the OU
wow.
Insider VIP board, man, but throw Miguel Chavis a parade because
Yeah,
that is the virtual equivalent of Ethan Downs going to Texas. Colton Vasek is a Texas legacy from the city of Austin. And for the vast majority of this recruitment, Texas was right there in the mix. Maybe not the outright leader, and there were some bizarre twists and turns along the way. Seemed for a while he was favoring Clemson, then Oregon, then there maybe was a brief time where Texas did actually lead. But at the end of it all, it looks like as we draw closer and closer to his announcement that Oklahoma is in the best position. For that kid not to end up at Texas is remarkable enough in its own right at face value. But for him to end up at Oklahoma, of all places, that's unheard of, Brandon. And again, Miguel Chavis can do no wrong on the recruiting trail right now, especially if he is able to lock down the pledge from Colton Vasek.
Yeah, he's done a remarkable job. And some of the players that he's in on in 24 already. I mean, you can't discount what that guy can do on the recruiting trail. He's pretty spectacular. I'm actually trying to look up right now who they've offered, and we've talked about Oklahoma's chances with a few guys, and not just in 23 but 24. And so when you're looking at whether it's, and I'm trying to find Kavion Henderson's a name to watch. I know that Oklahoma's
definitely a name to watch.
Yeah. Colin Simmons, Oklahoma's in a good spot for potentially. Edric Houston, Zena Umeozulu.
Watch Zoo, by the way.
Yeah.
Because and we haven't even had a chance to talk about the Michael
We haven't
Hawkins
talked
offer
about
yet.
We haven't talked about that.
We'll get there eventually. But watch Zoo.
Williams Nawarni. I mean, that's a guy that Nawari. How do you say it?
Waneri.
So the N silent.
More or less.
Yeah. Waneri. Okay, cool. I think Oklahoma is probably leading for Waneri. Would you assume that?
I don't know if I would say they're the outright leader right now. They are definitely among the leaders. I know he likes Oregon a lot, and I know he is very, very impressed with Alabama. I mean, you're talking about a top 75 player nationally, regardless of position. So that'll be a tough pull. But I will say, we have as many ties to Lee's Summit North, where Williams Nwaneri plays his high school ball, as Oklahoma does. OU is always going to be tough to deny in that one, even if they aren't the outright leader as of this moment.
Yeah, I also like Danny Okoye. I think Oklahoma is probably gonna, I think they end up with him at the end of the day. He fits Oklahoma. Agree. Yep, fits Oklahoma's style: long, rangy, athletic, twitchy, just a freak athlete. Honestly, he's a private school guy, or sorry, a homeschool guy out of the NOAH football program that's actually really good. They produced some very good players.
Yeah, produced LaRon Stokes.
Yep, LaRon Stokes, several other guys over the years. So I mean, it's not devoid of talent there at all. And like I said, Kavion, David Stone obviously is a Todd Bates guy, but T.A. Cunningham is a guy that Miguel Chavis is really close with, and they've done a very good job with him. So, and Nigel Smith's another guy that Bates and Chavis have combined on, but Chavis he's a player in that. For a guy that has never coached a single down,
That's the most impressive part about it too.
that's the craziest part about it. He's never done it, and the dude's out here landing 5 stars. Like, what is going on? Like, that's just where it's at. I mean, look, he's got that personality, man. If you ever get to know Miguel Chavis, and I've got to know him really well, he's a different dude, but like, he's a very loving, caring guy, and is genuine. And I think the players sense that and know that. And that's part of his whole appeal and wanting to play. And plus, he gets in there and gets after it with him. The dude wears cleats to practice so he can get in there and just get physical with them. And he looks like he could still play in the NFL.
There needs
Like,
to
the dude
be
looks.
it's OU football's next social media campaign just needs to be a docu-series that follows Miguel Chavis, a day in the life of
Right.
Miguel Chavis. Like, just a camera that follows him at practice every day, because he is a different dude, but he is a lot of fun.
Yeah, very much so. Okay, let's get to the party in the palace.
By all means.
Let's do it. Oklahoma came into this ranked 6th in the country, and they brought in players like Colton Vasek, Jacoby Johnson, Makari Vickers, David Hicks, Jackson Arnold, Peyton Bowen, Ryan Yates. I'm trying to think of more off the top of my head. David Stone's family came in for him. Jordan Renaud, Marquis Steele. There's just a lot of really good talent that showed up, and obviously all the commits showed up. I mean, almost every one of them except for Caden Green showed up. Keon Brown even came in from Florida. So there was a lot of talent that just collided in Norman on Thursday, Friday, and Saturday. And from what I have heard and what Parker's heard, this thing turned out to be just a grand slam, game-winning World Series grand slam. And look, I think what was the biggest selling point, obviously, was the one-on-ones with Venables, getting to see and talk to some people around, the players, all that type of stuff. That was great. But the biggest deal, I thought, was near the end or beginning. I can't remember how it started or ended. They had this soul mission portion of the visit where everybody got around and they had to stand up and introduce themselves and talk a little bit about themselves. And multiple people that were there, whether it was recruits or other people, parents, whatever, have told me the most emotional and biggest speech was made by one 5-star defensive lineman, David Hicks. And he stood up and he said, "My name is David Hicks, 5-star defensive lineman out of Katy Paytow. And I love the University of Oklahoma. I love the coaches." He said, "I'm not committed anywhere publicly. I'm not this, I'm not that, like, I'm not announcing my commitment. I'm not going to commit until December or January or anything like that." So he's made it known he wasn't committed. He wasn't this or that. But then he went into like this whole thing about the relationship he had with Coach Bates and Venables and the OU staff. And he said, "Look, I'm here. I could be other places, but I'm at the University of Oklahoma. And it's one of my top schools because of these guys." And he started pointing to Coach Bates, Coach Chavis, and Coach Valai, and Coach Venables, and all these guys, because the coaches stood up first and really gave heartfelt speeches to all these guys. And he says, "They care. I've known them for a long time and they care. They truly care about you. And he said, that's why I'm here, is because of them. And he started talking a little bit more. And everybody I talked to said that it was a really cool deal to see a guy of that stature stand up and say something and do something like that. It says, I mean, the dude's not committed and he still said all those things. So that shows you where Oklahoma stands with him, number one. Number two, it shows you kind of where his head's at a little bit, like what he's looking for with a lot of the universities, with a lot of the coaches. They do. He seems very relationship driven because he said, he struggled, and his dad's told me this a little bit, and David told me this a little bit when he was at Allen. It was hard being away from his mom and his family when they were down there in Houston. And he said that he could see himself in Norman because of Coach Pates and Coach Valai. And I thought that was something really cool when you see somebody that stature, you know, get up and do something like that. Obviously, Makari Vickers, Jacoby Johnson, Austin or Jackson Arnold got up there, Ryan Yates, they all said stuff. I thought the funniest part was, so I was told that Makari Vickers stood up and he goes, "My name's Makari Vickers, and I'm from Tallahatchie, Florida." Not Tallahatchie, not Tallahassee, Tallahatchie. So I thought that one was really interesting too. It's pretty funny.
Yeah, Brandon. I mean, the fact that Oklahoma's visit weekend went this well behind the scenes is frankly astonishing because I think it was like 9-10 uncommitted guys that were on campus this past weekend, something like that. In the end, Edric Hill didn't make it. Ben Minich didn't make it, but the vast majority of those guys that had originally planned to be there ended up making it down. Seemed like the Sooners hit a home run, like not just impressed, but hit a home run with pretty much every single one of these guys, with maybe an exception or two. But even the exception or two, it's not like, well, they hated their time. Like it really does seem like in the aftermath of this weekend, Oklahoma made significant progress with just about everybody that was there. And to me, what stands out the most about it is that it's still year one. Mm-hmm. Brent Venables hasn't coached a game at Oklahoma. As far as recruiting is concerned, this program's ahead of schedule. Imagine saying that. Imagine trying to convince anyone of that 5 weeks ago when the Sooners had the number 41 recruiting class in America and people were clowning the Sooners and their staff for being quote unquote 3-star U. Right? Where they are today is a far cry from where they were at the end of last month. And if they get Vosick tomorrow, that's 12 commits in 5 weeks. That's a pretty astonishing run. And again, I go back to the fact that this is all ahead of schedule. And obviously now for Oklahoma, the challenge is you got to go and win this fall. You got to go and validate the hype, because if you recruit a really solid class, but then come the fall, you don't play excellent football, well, then you're falling victim to exactly what, you're doing exactly what Texas has done for the last few years under Charlie Strong / Tom Herman / Steve Sarkisian. Right? The offseason national championship is not actual hardware, nor anything resembling it. The biggest thing for Oklahoma at this point in time, now that they have effectively covered all their bases on the recruiting trail and have built a class with tremendous depth and tremendous balance, as well as tremendous talent. Now the big challenge is, okay, take the guys you have in the locker room right now, put them out on the field in the fall, and win football games, because all of this falls apart if you don't. And I'm not talking about the recruiting class, right? I'm not trying to insinuate that the recruiting class is going to fall apart if Oklahoma only wins 7 or 8 games in 2022. But that is the difference between being able to build momentum towards a number 1 class in 2024 and staying stuck in neutral until you can prove to these elite prospects coast to coast that you are a championship caliber program under this new staff. That now becomes the focus. And we are about 36 hours away from media day, team media day for Oklahoma. And that's about the point at which the preseason, the college football preseason officially dawns. OU starts fall camp next week. It's not that far in the future at this point when you look ahead to September 3rd. Sooner football is not that far away. So we're getting close. We're getting real close to seeing what this team looks like in action, what Brent Venables' defense looks like in action. Is it going to be the refreshing change of pace, the drastic defensive improvement, and the continued prolific offensive attack that fans expect? Or are there going to be some bumps in the road along the way? You're going to take your lumps in year one as you implement a new system on both offense and defense. That's yet to be seen. There's a lot of optimism. I'd say understandably so, deservedly so. But that's going to have its ramifications on the recruiting trail as well. So yeah, Oklahoma's recruiting really, really well right now, and nobody can take that away from them. But now what can you do on the field this fall? At this point, to me, as the calendar flips from July to August, that's where I begin to shift my focus.
Yeah. Well, I mean, as far as, what Oklahoma's building as far as roster goes and through this recruiting class, because it's honestly, it's going to be one of the better, if not the best recruiting class of all time, at least in the last decade that we've seen Oklahoma amass and accumulate. And I know since I've been covering it, starting back in 2014, 2013, this is the best that I've seen. And I think it's also probably the most balanced. I mean, it's, one thing with the previous staff, you saw it would either be a very defense heavy class or be a very offense heavy class. There wasn't a lot of good balance there. And I think that's something with this class that I think is different than a lot of others, where you have high-end defense, you got high-end offense. It's not just one side. And I think that to me is how you build, like you said, that national title run. And, you have a top 8 class last year. You have a chance to have a top, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 class this year. I don't think Oklahoma drops any further than 8 this year. I honestly, I can't, if they're not in the top 5 at this point, I think it would be shocking with what they have left on the board and where they stand with those players left on the board. So Venables is moving mountains, and he's pissing everybody off while he does it, because Oklahoma gets hot in the month of July, and all of a sudden a video from 5 months ago gets propped up about a commitment, and now everybody's calling him a hypocrite, not even realizing that he's doing exactly what he said he was going to do. If you're going to take visits, whether you're committed to somebody else or to Oklahoma, he doesn't view you as a commit to that school. So if you're willing to take a visit to him, that means you're not really committed to that other school. So of course you're going to take that visit. Now, if on the flip side, if somebody asked Ashton Cozart, he took a visit.
Yeah, well, he messed around and found out, right?
And
that was kind of the guinea pig.
Oklahoma dropped him. I mean, just moved on from him. So, I mean, and I love Ashton. Great kid. But, I mean, and he was kind of shocked that happened. I think people thought it was bluffing. And he showed everybody he was sticking to his guns. Like, this is how it's going to be, man. So, I think that's people call it like an archaic way of doing things. You don't see a lot of Bama commits visiting other places. Why is that?
You do see a lot of Bama signing top 5 classes.
Exactly. Clemson, they don't visit other people. They sign a lot of top 5 classes. Ohio State, their players don't visit a lot of people. Top 5 classes. It's not an archaic way of looking at things, because it seems like most of the top programs do it. And the ones that allow all these visits, the fan bases are going nuts. Yeah, it's boring as far as no drama, but at the end of the day, when you're winning national titles, who cares? Or playing for them at least. Who cares? You're doing exactly what you're supposed to do. You're getting top tier classes, putting kids in the NFL, and winning a bunch of college football games. And that's exactly what Venables is trying to do and what he was hired to do. So he's doing his job. And whether people want to call him a hypocrite or not, who cares? That's how I see it. Let's talk about David Hicks a little bit. There's been some people putting picks in for him. I'm not ready to do that just yet. Now, Oklahoma, I do think Oklahoma's a leader. I don't even think that's a question at this point.
That is not a question after and especially with the knowledge that he didn't go to Texas A&M's pool party.
Correct.
Right,
and so
with the knowledge that he didn't make it to A&M, but he did get up to Oklahoma this past weekend, that at the very least, that tells you where his priorities lay in this little window where 2023 prospects could take their visits before the dead period.
And so, this look, that said everything to me. And I kind of knew it wasn't going to happen, just from talking to his dad. It just was always up in the air. His mom and dad were on vacation in Mexico, so his grandparents brought him up to Oklahoma and spent Thursday night, Friday night, and left Saturday afternoon, evening to go back to Houston, Saturday afternoonish. So they were basically there for 3 days and spent a lot of time around the program, around the coaches. I don't think if you talk to anybody around Hicks that they would probably tell you, Oklahoma's probably the leader. That relationship he had with Coach Bates, going back to Clemson, Coach Venables going back to Clemson, it goes back a long time. I think 7th, 8th grade is when all that stuff started happening. And, that relationship, that's something you keep hearing over and over, by the way, with Coach Bates is relationships. You hear it with LeBlanc, you hear it with Renaud, you hear it with Bates, you hear it with Caden McDonald. I mean, all these different players, you keep hearing this word relationship in regards to Coach Bates. And I think that is another thing that's way different that Oklahoma fans are going to have to get used to, because landing top tier defensive lineman is going to be kind of a thing moving forward. And Oklahoma being the leader for David Hicks, he's not going to announce or even commit until December or January. So we'll see where it goes from there. But obviously, I want to wait another month or so, maybe. And I don't know. I may put one in before that. But even though I think Oklahoma's the leader, I think there could be potential twists and turns, like most 5-star recruitments. Being that the location between Texas A&M and Katy, Texas is 45 minutes to an hour. That seems a little easier, especially when he lived in Allen, Texas, wasn't a big fan of being away from that region. Dad took a job back down at Katy, and now they're, doing their thing down there, playing for the defending 5A state title or state champs. So I don't want everybody to get overhyped about this just yet, but there's a good reason for OU fans to be excited. But I think you need to know that December and January is a ways off.
No doubt. And well, on that topic, then let's talk about another elite defensive lineman that was on campus this past weekend for the party at the Palace, and that would be Jordan Renaud, a guy that both you and I have since entered crystal ball predictions in favor of Oklahoma for. And in talking to people about the Jordan Renaud situation, there was a ton of confidence even before he showed up in Norman that things were moving in the right direction between him and Oklahoma. I talked to several folks who told me the exact same thing. Hey, OU's looking increasingly like the spot for Jordan Renaud. And I think it said a lot, Brandon. And we talked about this window and how small it is before the dead period hits, right? It said a lot that Alabama had a big recruiting weekend as well. One that they had plenty of elite prospects that showed up for, including 5-star Notre Dame edge commit Keon Keeley. That was kind of the biggest fish in the pond down in Tuscaloosa this past weekend. But it said a lot to me that Jordan Renaud on this particular weekend was in Norman, Oklahoma, and not Tuscaloosa, Alabama. So that in and of itself, that said something, and it carried some weight. But from all indications, from all the conversations that I know you and I have both had with folks ever since that visit wrapped up, it seems as though, like we were saying earlier, Oklahoma hit a home run with Jordan Renaud on this visit. And again, this one isn't necessarily nearing the finish line, and Oklahoma's not necessarily out of the woods. Anytime you're dealing with Nick Saban, and can't emphasize this enough, right? Anytime you're dealing with Nick Saban, no lead is ever safe. But it does seem as though Oklahoma emerged from this weekend with a pretty sizable lead in Jordan Renaud's recruitment. And again, man, if it feels like we talk about the defensive line and the direction that recruiting is going at that particular position group, more so than any other position group across the team. And to a certain extent, that's understandable because you look at what they already have committed. PJ Adebawore and Derrick LeBlanc, those are 2 national top 100 guys. You look at the guy they may have committed tomorrow in Colton Vasek, number 153 player in the 24/7 Sports Composite, and that number will rise, I can promise you. You look at the guys that they are in the mix for. Obviously, now they've just taken a significant lead for Renaud. He is a top 100 guy. We've talked about Cecilia Kana. He is a top 100 guy. Lord knows what kind of player David Hicks is. And I think every fan across the entire Sooner fan base, especially if you've been tuned into what we've been saying over the course of the past year and a half, you know just how good of a football player DJ Hicks is and has the potential to be at the next level. Number 7 player right now in the 24/7 Sports Composite, if I'm not mistaken. So this has the chance, Brandon, to be a haul for Oklahoma on the recruiting trail in general. This class is going to be spectacular. But when you're looking specifically at the defensive front, and that was always where it was going to have to start for Brent Venables and his defensive scheme at Oklahoma. That was where they were going to have to start reeling in some elite players, where they were going to have to start building a core of individuals, the likes of which from a physical and from a ceiling perspective, the University of Oklahoma hasn't seen in quite some time. If they could start to do that, then at that point, Brent Venables' defense and his scheme and his vision could really begin to take root tangibly. And that was probably about the point at which you could start to work yourself out of the transition period and into the true new era of Oklahoma Sooners defense. Said it before, I'll say it again. It's ahead of schedule. It is way ahead of schedule. And there are some freakish athletes that could join up in this Oklahoma 2023 recruiting class and be some of the building blocks for the elite Oklahoma defenses that obviously Sooner fans expect will become the norm under Brent Venables in years to come. PJ Adebawore is a freak, man. Derrick LeBlanc is a freak. David Hicks is a freak. Akana, Vasek, Jordan Renaud, all freaks. Right there, you are talking about 6 players that will be inside the composite top 150 by the end of this cycle, and all of them could be Oklahoma Sooners. That's nuts.
Yeah, it's crazy. And, again, you can't overstate just the recruiting prowess that Oklahoma's been doing. And Renaud is, like you said, another player that Oklahoma's positioned themselves well with. I was just down there in Tyler, Texas, a month ago. And at that point in time, he had Alabama, gloves on, and Alabama seemed to be trending. That's because he had just taken an official visit to Alabama. So he was feeling the Crimson Tide at that point, and understandably so. Always competing for national champs, producing big-time defensive linemen into the NFL. It goes without saying. But now Oklahoma has Todd Bates and Brent Venables, and they've done that at Clemson, and Venables did it when he was at Oklahoma before he left. So it's not like the pedigree and development isn't there. And I think, when you're dealing with a guy that his dad's a coach or former coach, now just doing some teaching and stuff like that, they understand that. And then you get the distance thrown in on this, and it makes it easier for his family to drive 4 hours to Norman than 8 hours to 9 hours to maybe even more than that to Tuscaloosa on weekends. And further, when you have to go to all these other games where most of Oklahoma's games are going to be either in Texas, Oklahoma, or Kansas, like those are just easier drives. And it just makes sense for them logistically at this point. So, I mean, you have that plan for it. Then obviously, again, the relationship, Todd Bates, Brent Venables, the relationship with the Renaud family that predates even the time at Oklahoma. So all that stuff added up with the visit that went really well for Renaud again. And he seems that every time he goes to Oklahoma, he just speaks so glowingly about OU. And so that's where everybody's kind of getting this feeling that now Oklahoma's trending really high. Plus, Oklahoma still has their official. I think a lot of people thought Renaud was going to get his recruitment over with in June. And that's why Alabama scheduled their official with him. And that may backfire a little bit for them. And Oklahoma just went, nah, I don't think he's going to get it over with. And as a matter of fact, they're just going to let him go ahead and take his official during the season and then take another unofficial if he wants to. I mean, here's the deal. I think this is another interesting thing. He's supposed to be going to Alabama, Texas A&M on October 8th. You want to know what game's on October 8th in Dallas? OU, Texas. There's a good chance that they just end up there. I mean, that's a fact. So
and
I
it's
think
it's Oklahoma's year to host.
And Oklahoma's hosting.
Yep.
So they would be able to go to the game for free. So there's a lot of things working in Oklahoma's favor there. I think he ends up at Oklahoma. I put a crystal ball in for him. But again, like you said, and like I put my note up on OU Insider VIP board, not giving Alabama their due here is crazy, because let's say they miss out on Keon Keeley. They're going to turn right back around and press for Renaud very hard.
Yeah, they will.
So this thing is far from over. I think once everybody knows what Keon Keeley's going to end up doing, I think then you're going to have a better idea what's going to happen with Renaud moving forward too. But that's just my opinion. I don't know, fact. I don't know Alabama's numbers or anything. That's just my opinion, just off of what I've seen so far and heard from a few people. So, I mean, a long ways to go a little bit. I think probably won't know for another month, 2 months what Renaud's going to do, but Oklahoma's trending and they're doing a really good job there. Let's talk about we're going to have a bunch on this party in the Palace on OU Insider VIP. We've already got a bunch between Parker, myself, Steve Wiltfong. There's been notes after notes after notes on this on the OU Insider VIP board. And if you want to do that, you can sign up $1 for the first month, $9.95 afterwards, or you can sign up for $75, get you a whole year. And after that year, you get Paramount Plus added to it. So if you pay $108, the full price, you get, not only do you get OU Insider and all of 247 Sports, you get Paramount Plus, and that's over a $220 value just for like $108. So it's well worth it if you want to go ahead and try OU Insider. Now, when you first sign up OU Insider 1 year, you don't have to pay that $108. It's $75, and you still get all of 247 Sports. So if you want to go see Alabama, site, you want to go read their VIP board, Texas A&M, USC, Oklahoma State, you can go do that. That comes with your membership. So it's not just OU Insider. You get the whole gambit of all 250 sites on 24/7 Sports. Excuse me. I got in trouble for saying 24/7 Sports, not 247 Sports. So, yeah, it's a good deal, folks. Good deal. Let's move on here a little bit before we close this podcast out. Fall camp's going to start here on August 5th.
Hey, hang on before we jump to fall camp, because I think that would be a good place to kind of land the plane. We should probably talk real quickly about the Wednesday visit day and the youngins.
That
Oklahoma had on campus in 24 and 25.
Yeah, well, they had the underclassmen in, players like Kevin Sperry Jr., 2025 quarterback from Prosper, Rock Hill, picking up a ton of offers. Oklahoma has not offered. When they do offer, I don't know how long that recruitment stays open. I really don't. I think Oklahoma's in a really good spot there. I think they're going to take visits, and I'm not saying they're going to commit right off the bat. That's ridiculous. But look, they've done a really good job building relationship with the Sperry family, and it just makes sense being that Prosper's only 2 hours from Norman. Just the relationships they have, the offense Levy's has. I mean, there's a gambit of reasons why Oklahoma is right there near the top and they haven't offered yet. And after a few games, don't be shocked by November if he doesn't have an offer already from Oklahoma. And that's facts. But he went there, did really good at the camp, was one of those guys. Obviously, so other C4 guys, Zadavian Sims was there, did really good for 2024, 4-star defensive lineman. Oklahoma's a leader for him. I don't know. Obviously, I think it's an OU Michigan State battle there. Alabama, if they ever throw their name in the hat, it's going to be a problem there too. So essentially, it's basically like 3 teams right now for Zadavian Sims, but he's got a bunch of offers. He's at Durant right now, Durant, Oklahoma, moved there from Sherman. So he's an OK Preps guy now. Another OK Preps guy, 2026, defensive end, edge rusher Colton Yarbrough was there. He was hurt during the camp that he went to in the summer. Came back this time, did really good, really impressed. He's picking up offers from a bunch of people. Hasn't ever played a varsity down.
Hasn't even played a high school down.
Yeah, well, that's what I mean. Like a varsity down, high school down. He's going to be a freshman. So he's already got several offers, like P5, SEC, Big Ten offers already on the board for him. He's going to be a special guy. Another guy that was there was 5-star defensive back, Charles Lester. I went out and saw him in the Sarasota area back in the end of May. Oklahoma has always been one of his top schools. I think this is an Oklahoma-Alabama battle right now. Georgia's in it. He finally visited Georgia the other day. But so I maybe a 3-team race. He's visited Michigan, but I think he wants to stay in the SEC, Big 12 region, kind of in the South. Coach Valai has a really good relationship with him. He had a great time on the visit. So I think Oklahoma is in a really good spot there. Not saying they're going to get him or anything like that. But I think Oklahoma is in a really good spot. Another player is 2024 4-star defensive back Cory Gibson was in town out of Lancaster, Texas. He's got offers from everybody in the country, and Oklahoma is right there at the top with him. So I think that's another player to watch. Jayden Hardy was in town, Louisville safety, 4-star safety. Originally was at IMG. He was there. And I think we'd be remiss if we didn't mention David Stone's family came on Friday in all of this, since we're talking about underclassmen. He was at Michigan State, and his mom and dad and his brothers came to OU. His sister attends OU, lives in Norman. So there is a lot, like who had to be sold is mom. And from everything I've gathered, home run, big time deal. So And he's even named OU his favorite. Like to every reporter, national reporters ever, they said, "Who's your favorite school?" OU.
Yeah.
So Oklahoma's trending there very, very well.
Yeah, it is. It is no secret that David Stone is very heavily leaning Oklahoma at this point in the process. And I think as you look ahead to 2024 for Oklahoma, they are not going to roll into June with 3 commits the way they did this past June. There's a very good chance that they have double-digit guys committed by then. And I don't think that's an exaggeration to say that they could roll into June with double-digit commits. I think there's a very good chance they end up with a handful of commits by the end of the calendar year. When you look at the way things are trending with some of their key targets in that class. And I think it's going to start, if I had to put money down, I think it's going to start with Michael Hawkins, the 4-star quarterback out of Allen, Texas. I would be shocked if that wasn't your quarterback in the class of 2024 for the Oklahoma Sooners. And we have talked
I think
about
Arkansas is a player there, though, right?
Arkansas, certainly.
That's what I've always figured.
If there's one school that's a fly in the ointment, it's Arkansas. But OU has always been the dream for Michael Hawkins. And we've talked about him on this podcast before, talked about him extensively on OU Insider VIP dating back to last November. And when he got the offer, which was kind of a formality, I was told, I think April or May, because people were starting to wonder at that time, okay, Oklahoma's starting to make offers at the quarterback position. When is Michael Hawkins going to get his? The word at that point was they just need to see him in person before they make the offer. Well, they got the opportunity to see him in person this past Wednesday, and the offer was extended. I would be very, very surprised if that is not the quarterback in the class of 2024 for Oklahoma. OU is going to be very tough to deny there. Kids, obviously, OU legacy. His father, the elder Michael Hawkins, played defensive back at Oklahoma in the early 2000s. And so that is kind of the origin of the interest and the affinity there. Some of the other kids, when you look at the 2024 class that Oklahoma is going to be heavy in the mix for, and potentially could secure early commits from, Payton Pierce, the 4-star linebacker out of Lovejoy, Texas, very close friend of Michael Hawkins. Those two played together at Allen as freshmen. Payton Pierce is one of 2 players in the history of Allen High School to start at the varsity level as a freshman. How about that? But Pierce is another guy with a lot of ties to Oklahoma. Great grandfather played at OU. Grandparents still live in Norman. Dad played at Tulsa. But Peyton's older brother actually wrestled at Oklahoma. He was, his claim to fame is that he was the quarterback that Kyler Murray unseated at Allen High School. But Peyton's older brother went on to wrestle at Oklahoma. Peyton's interest in Oklahoma is very, very strong. Arkansas, again, a major player there, but I have a crystal ball in for Oklahoma in Payton Pierce's recruitment. And I think he and Michael Hawkins could be 2 key cornerstones in that class for OU. And if you get those 2, I cannot emphasize this enough. If you get those 2, that will have a massive ripple effect on Oklahoma's ability to recruit the DFW area, and particularly that corner of DFW, the Northeast region. When you think about where Lovejoy and Allen are on the map, another kid that I think Oklahoma would significantly increase their odds with if they get Hawkins and Pierce is Nigel Smith, 4-star defensive lineman out of Melissa High School. He's very close with those 2. He is very high on Oklahoma as it is. But if you get Hawkins and Pierce in the boat early and they get to prodding Nigel Smith, much like David Hicks over the course of the majority of his recruiting process up until probably March or April, Nigel Smith is a guy that's going to end up taking a lot of visits to Oklahoma and to Texas A&M before this is all said and done. Ohio State is a factor there as well. But if you get Hawkins and Pierce, if you are predicating your 2024 recruiting foray into DFW with the presumption that you get those 2 at this juncture, Nigel Smith is one of those players with whom OU's odds would exponentially increase. So to me, that's where it starts in DFW. And Oklahoma has the opportunity to build a really strong class out of DFW alone. You already mentioned Jayden Hardy. You mentioned Cory and Gibson. You want to trot over to the Fort Worth side. Jordan Johnson-Rubel is at Fort Worth Brewer by way of IMG Academy at the moment. There's a lot of elite football players in the Dallas-Fort Worth area every year, but especially when you look at the upper echelon in the class of 2024, Oklahoma has made offers to and is very heavily in the mix for a lot of those kids. So to me, that's kind of the first hotbed that you got to look to mine in 2024. You're gonna want to clean up in state, obviously, and that starts with David Stone, that starts with Zadavian Sims. But I think the next order of business, if you're the Oklahoma staff, hey, go clean sweep Dallas-Fort Worth, because you can, and the dudes that you have the opportunity to pull, especially on the defensive side, you can build a championship football program with a class that includes some of those names that I mentioned.
Yeah, no, I mean that class. Look, I was dabbling with the 2024 class the other day, just in the class calculator, and needless to say, David Stone, Jayden Hardy, Mike Hawkins, Umia Zulu, all that. I think I got up with just like 13 commits. You were looking at like 225 points or something like that. Like this class, like as good as 2023 is, 24 has a chance to like crush it. And that's the crazy part about all this. So I think people need to have high expectations for the recruiting game moving forward, because I think it all depends on how Oklahoma does during the 2022 season. If they win 9, 10, 11 games, I think you're looking at, Oklahoma move forward. I agree. I think they're going to win more than that, but it's just one of those deals where, if you win, 10, 11, 12 games during this upcoming season, and say Oklahoma's competing or say they win the Big 12. Let's just, for argument's sake here, they win the Big 12 and they're right on the cusp of the playoffs. At that point, I think you see Oklahoma's recruiting skyrocket again. And that's because now there's proof. The 2023 class is betting on Venables and his staff. The 2024 class is going to have proof in the pudding, one way or the other. And I think that's going to determine how good the 2024 class is going to be. If Oklahoma's a 9-win season, I think you're looking at, probably you're looking at a top 10 recruiting class. If they win 10, 11, 12 games, I think you're looking at a potential top 5 class in 24. So I think that is how all this is going to play out. And that's why I agree with you. I think if Oklahoma gets hot early in the season, I think you're going to see some 24 kids start to jump on board pretty quickly. I really do.
I mean, you mentioned you have a chance at the top 5 class. That would be my expectation, my baseline expectation for Oklahoma in 2024, if all goes according to plan and things don't fall apart on the field this fall. But if Oklahoma has the season that many expect them to have, including us, yeah, they'll get a top 5 class in 2024. And I would venture to say, with some of the names that we threw out there as guys that are leaning Oklahoma at this point in time, probably going to get a top 3 class if all goes according to plan. And 2024 is a class that we have talked about for some time as one that Oklahoma could hover in number 1 territory within. And I don't think that's outlandish. Again, much will depend on how the Sooners look on the football field this fall. But if they have the season we expect them to have, they have the season that many expect them to have, a top 5 class will be the baseline expectation for me rolling into the 2024 cycle.
No, I agree. Quickly, let's talk about the upcoming season. Obviously, Oklahoma and fall practice is about to start kicking off this week. Media day on Tuesday. Our media day will start at about 8 a.m. with Coach Ted Roof. Then we will have all the defensive staff at a table and be able to ask them questions. 9 a.m. will be Jeff Lebby. And then after that, about 9:20, we will have all the offensive staffers at a table and be able to ask them a question. 10 a.m., Brent Venables. And then at about 10:20, 10:30, we will get to talk to players, select players as all that takes place. So have you heard anything about Meet the Players or anything like that this year?
No, I do not have any inkling as to who those players might be that we'll get.
No, Meet the Players with the fans.
Oh,
The autograph session with the kids.
No, I haven't heard anything to this point about that.
I will hit up the OU or OU spokesperson and see if I can find that out for people. I know I've been asked that question by several folks, so I thought maybe you had heard something. So I wasn't sure. But yeah, the Oklahoma season coming up right around the corner. I think everybody has questions they want answered as far as, how's the offensive line going to look now? And I think a lot of the issues were strength and conditioning with the previous staff, because you saw as they got further away from Schmitty, they got worse. 17, 18, they were great. 19, not so much, because that was the first time you didn't have Schmitty built guys really leading the brigade. So I think that's a big difference. I think you're going to see an uptick in toughness and physicality and just overall blocking. I know that's very simplistic to say, but I think it's fact that strength and conditioning had a lot to do with that. It's going to be questions about Dylan Gabriel. Can he lead this team? Can he stay healthy? I think these are questions, obviously, you're going to be answered during the season, but they're going to be asked during the preseason. And unable to answer or not, they're going to be asked. I think, a player I've heard big things about, Marcus Major. There is a lot of people that think that guy's going to have a big year. A lot. So we'll see there. Defensively, I think safety is like the one place people have questions, and it's not the starters. It's not Key Lawrence. It's not Billy Bowman. It's depth. And that's a fair question. It's things those you're going to find out during the season. Can Robert Spears, Jennings, can Jordan Mukes, can they really do what they need to do behind the scenes, behind those guys and get better? Cornerback wise, man, that's a deep position and talented position. I mean, there's so much talent there. I was talking to somebody the other day and they said they're going to lose like 4 or 5 guys after this year, but the dudes they have, like, there shouldn't be a drop off because they're so deep, so talented. Coach Valai just has a whole bunch of things at his disposal there. Obviously, wide receiver, again, I've heard good things about Marvin Mims, Drake Stoops, Jalil Farouk. Nick Anderson is a guy I continue to hear good things about over and over and over. Obviously, Jayden Gibson. So it's going to be a deep class. And also, trying to think here, JJ Hester is another guy I've heard quite a bit about. So, look, I think this team has a chance to be, I'm going to pick them 11-1 right now going into the season. And I could see a 12-0 season possible. But I could see, I'm going to pick them 11-1, but I could see 10-2 and 12-0 as well. Like, that's kind of the baseline I have them at right now. And if that's the case, that's a successful first season for Brent Venables.
You're in
Very
Arlington.
successful. You're in Arlington, and you have a potential to compete for a playoff spot. So I think you've got to be happy with that if you're an OU fan. I'm not going to sit here and break down game by game here, but that's just my overall expectations. What's yours, real quick, Parker, before we close this out?
Yeah, no, I agree with you. I think they're going to be 11-1. As I look at the schedule again, kind of like what you said, I don't know that I can look at the schedule right now and tell you where that loss is going to be. I think there's a number of games where it could end up happening, but a 12-0 season in today's day and age in college football, it doesn't matter which program you are, doesn't matter how deep your conference is, doesn't matter how difficult your schedule is. To finish the regular season undefeated is very, very difficult. And so I don't think that happens for Oklahoma. I think they trip up somewhere along the way. It might be a game against a really formidable opponent like a Baylor or like an Oklahoma State. When you're looking at the two teams that played for the Big 12 championship a year ago, I think Kansas State's going to have a really, really good year, and they have the opportunity to win double-digit games. It could happen. I mean, they could slip up against one of these teams that a lot of folks are looking past, maybe a TCU with Chandler Morris at quarterback, or an Iowa State coming off a down year. It just it seems like there's always that trap game for every program in college football at some point in time. Somebody loses somewhere along the way. Year in and year out, there's only, I mean, here's the thing. If there are 3 programs in college football in a given year that finish 12-0 at the end of the regular season, that's out of the ordinary. Generally, you're looking at 1 or 2. And some years, none. So going undefeated is hard. But I think Oklahoma can win double-digit games. I agree. I think they go 11-1 in the regular season. I think they could just as easily drop another one along the line, somewhere down the line, and be 10-2. But I think they win double-digit games. And I am confident in this team's ability to go toe-to-toe with the better, more talented programs on their schedule, like Baylor and like Texas. And I know people hear me say Texas, they're going to be like, yeah, well, they went 5-7 last year. I understand that. I'm not saying talented. Texas. Yeah, exactly. And I'm not saying Texas is necessarily going to be a good team in 2022, but you have to acknowledge that is a talented team. There can be a difference between talented and good, right? Talented and successful. You can be successful without being especially talented, i.e., Kansas State last year, or in years past, for instance. I mean, that's Kansas State's MO, being successful while not particularly talented. And similarly, you can be talented and you can be not very successful. It happens. So to echo some of what you've said regarding the team, I also have heard really, really nice things about Nick Anderson. And that's a guy that a lot of folks forget about because he was injured for much of spring practice. And so he didn't get the opportunity of somebody like Jayden Gibson to really strut his stuff throughout the spring. Jacob Sexton is a guy that I would say probably cracks the 2 deep. I've heard some really good things about that kid, and his ceiling is off the charts. When you look at the defensive line, I mean, I don't know that there are any OU media members or media members in general, Brandon, that have been as high for as long on Ethan Downs as you and I. He is poised to take a huge leap in year 2 and have an outstanding season, a very productive season. I like what Marcus Stripling can be in Brent Venables' defense, especially with the odd fronts that you get. When you're talking about the secondary, here's a name. And I legitimately don't know if we have mentioned his name in 6 months. Jamarian Burt is a guy that a lot of people forget is an Oklahoma Sooner, to be quite honest. But incoming true freshman, pure athlete from the state of Florida, was formerly committed to Florida. Oklahoma made a late run to sign him down the stretch in the 2022 cycle. And he ends up in Norman. Was a high 3-star prospect, kind of a positionless athlete. I mean, you watch the tape on him, it wasn't immediately where he was going to play at the next level, but you could see stuff that translated to college football. You could see speed and elusiveness and physicality and a hard-nosed demeanor. And so that's a kid that's a good enough athlete that I wonder where he ends up on the depth chart after fall camp, because you never really know with those summer enrollees. It's always a shot in the dark. Danny Stutzman was a guy that didn't get there until June last year. And lo and behold, through 2 games, he led Oklahoma in tackles. And so there's a lot of room for variance when you're talking about June enrollees. R. Mason Thomas is another guy that I think is going to be a dog down the line. I don't know how quickly he factors into the picture with how many guys Oklahoma has up front or at that edge position right now. But I'll be curious to see if he can't work his way onto the field in year number 1. I'm excited to watch Billy Bowman at safety, because I think he was a guy that was quite blatantly misused last year by the former staff. And now that he has the opportunity to lock into a single position and give that his entire focus and simply work on honing his skills as a safety, learning that position in and out, and not having to worry about bouncing down to corner or to nickel. When you're talking about just from a sheer athletic standpoint, Billy Bowman has one of the highest ceilings on the entire roster. And so I am very excited to see what he does, presumably as the starting free safety. I would figure as you look at the roster right now, you look at the back end of that secondary, he's the odds-on favorite to start at free safety. And then the last position that I'll bring up that I'm really kind of curious to see how it shakes out is that nickel. Is it Justin Harrington? Is it Justin Broyles? Is it Jaden Davis? Got a lot of veterans that are going to be in the mix right there. 3 guys that have played plenty of football. Jaden Rowe, you mentioned him. Trey Morrison is in that conversation as well. There are so many guys in that Oklahoma secondary that if they're not already repping at the nickel, they have the versatility and they have the ability to shift to nickel if duty calls. And I wonder who breaks camp as the starter at that position. The little bonus nugget, I suppose, if you can call it that. Bill Bedenbaugh always throws a curveball at us with his offensive line group every single year. I wonder what that curveball looks like in 2022. Because you think back to 2020, for instance, Anton Harrison broke camp as the starting left tackle as a true freshman. Nobody saw that coming. 2021, Bill Bedenbaugh had a preseason all Big 12 selection in Wanye Morris at tackle. And instead he uprooted Tyrese Robinson from his position at guard and moved him out to right tackle. So Bedenbaugh is not afraid to mix and match and shuffle the deck with his group. I wonder if he's got a couple of tricks up his sleeve in terms of what he rolls out personnel wise for the Sooners season opener on September 3rd against UTEP.
Yeah, it's going to be an exciting year, and I think everybody's pretty excited about that season coming up and the fact that fall camp's kicking off, and we're going to have a lot of team stuff coming moving forward on OU Insider to go along with all the recruiting stuff. So with that, again, you can join us. Literally, we've had 500 plus new signups this past month. You OU fans are amazing. We love you guys. Thank you guys so much for doing that. Joining us on OU Insider. We're at an all-time high, like records right now, just blowing past our record highs. And it's because you guys make it possible. That's why we're here. 11 plus million page views in July. Never been done before on OU Insider. Done this time. You guys did it, not us, you guys. And that's what we're here. We're here for you guys. We love doing this for you guys. So if you want to, you can join us. $1 for the first month, $9.95 afterwards. That'll be month to month. So $10 a month. That's literally going to Starbucks, man. Going to Starbucks. You go to Starbucks how many times a week? OU Insider, you're going to get all the college football content, NFL, all that stuff across the 247 Sports 24/7 Sports platform. and it's worth it. It's 100% worth it. Or you can join us, $75, 30% off, 30% off, $75 will get you a whole year OU Insider, 24/7 sports, all 250 sites, VIP. And then after the first year's up, you pay full price and you get Paramount Plus for free. That means you get all your sports, you get all the MTV, Comedy Central, 2000 movies, 1883, Tulsa Kings that Sylvester Stallone's been filming in Oklahoma City and a little bit around Tulsa. I don't know why he's filming more in Oklahoma City than Tulsa for Tulsa Kings, but that's the way that thing works. It's weird. But you get that. You get, like I said, 1883. You get The Offer, how The Godfather was made. Great show, by the way. Great show. You get Kings of I can't remember, the Kingstown, Mayor of Kingstown. There it is, Mayor of Kingstown with Jeremy Renner. You can get Evil. You can get all the Star Trek, Star Wars, whatever you want to do. They've got it on Paramount Plus for you, and that comes with your OU Insider VIP member after the first year. So that's $220 in value. So, hey, come join us. We're going to have all the OU content for you, whether it's recruiting, whether it's team stuff, whether it's basketball, whether it's football, whether it's baseball, softball. We've got it for you. We cover it like nobody else, and we take pride in that. So come join us, OUinsider.com, VIP, $1 for the first month, and $9.95 afterwards, or you can join $75 upfront the first year, then $108 the next year, and you get Paramount Plus with it. So, hey, we hope to see you guys there. Joey, Parker, myself, Hayden, Brian, we're on there every day talking to you guys, answering your questions, bringing you VIP information that you won't know. You be the cool guy at the water cooler talking about, oh yeah, my sources told me this, blah, 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 about what's going on at OU. Hey, that's what we're here for. We're here for you. So thank you guys so much for listening to this version of the OU Insider Under the Visor Sooners podcast. My name is Brandon Drumm for Parker Thune. You guys have a blessed night.